From October through March, Mexico accounted for 22% of U.S. corn exports, more than any other country. Its imports over that time frame were also 3% higher than the same period the previous year. As we noted, though, the industry's concern is whether or not Mexican buyers will look for other suppliers. U.S. Grains Council President and CEO Tom Sleight took part in Tuesday's press conference in Lincoln. We talked with him Monday about the future for NAFTA, biotechnology concerns in China, and emerging markets for U.S. product. But we started our conversation by asking about the mission of the U.S. Grains Council.
Well, the U.S. Grains Council has been around since 1960, and our mission is to develop markets, enable trade, and improve lives. It's a very simple mission statement, but what it is we're the export market development arm for U.S. corn, sorghum, and barley, and their co-products, ethanol, DDGs, and we work all around the world.
How has the environment for trade changed over the last year?
Well, in the last hour, it's changed quite. It's been very changeable over the last several months in terms of just a whole new outlook on trade. I guess trade's become a lot more important for U.S. agriculture right now. As we've developed, record or near record crops, as demand starts to straighten out, flatten out here in the United States, a lot of people are looking for the demand growth that's always been there in the international marketplace, but it's more important now than ever before.
How valuable is trade for the U.S. producer?
I think right now, 30% of U.S. income comes from the export market, all aggregated in terms of all the different things that go together. And so it's an important part, and again, every last bushel, that's what creates the price for commodities. And so every last bushel that's exported, every last market we develop, that creates the overall demand for the products. And so trade is an incredibly important component for producers' income.
So when we talk about the environment of trade, have you noticed changes in the attitude of some customers, specifically in Mexico, where there has been a lot of talk back and forth?
Yeah, it's something that we've been tracking very closely, particularly over the last couple of months. I was down in Mexico about a month ago. We had gotten reports from our office in Mexico that our traditional customers there were becoming frosty. They were starting to wonder what's going on with their relationship with their good suppliers in the United States, and they were really upset, confused by some of the rhetoric that they're hearing on both sides of the border. So that the relationship with a very strong customer, Mexico, which is the #1 export market for U.S. corn right now, changed pretty markedly in a very short period of time. And so right now we're trying to reinforce and re-understand that whole relationship that we have with right now our best customer for corn.
So is there a permanent repercussion, or at least a possibility of a permanent repercussion in Mexico with perhaps them looking to Argentina and Brazil and securing trade deals there?
It's happening already where they're looking. They're at least looking. There have been several trade missions, one last week, that included a lot of feed milling folks, folks that we normally meet with, looking at building contacts within South America, Brazil, Argentina. The Mexican Ministry of Agriculture is posting comparative pricing. There's a lot of interest in looking at alternative sources of supply. Now that interest hasn't translated yet into sales that's cutting into U.S., particularly on corn. There has been some sales perhaps, we think, in rice, and there's one rumored to be coming on in wheat and maybe even in beef. Right now for corn, so far we haven't seen anything, but there's a lot of investigation, a lot of price comparison going on right now that never happened before.
What is the outlook for NAFTA?
Well, I think it's on. Right now, I think it's on a good plane where there's a commitment of all three countries to renegotiate, to modernize NAFTA. And that's where we wanted to be. Any trade agreement, especially one that's been in place for 23, 24 years, places where it can be improved. And certainly that's true for NAFTA. I think what we've seen now is all three countries are committed to refining their lists for NAFTA renegotiation. They're getting, starting to look at setting a process in motion. So I think we'll get with it, and prospects right now is at least we're on an even plane towards a good, honest renegotiation.
When the farmer hears modernizing NAFTA, what does that mean?
It means taking some elements that could stand a little bit of improvement. For instance, there's dispute settlement processes in place for sanitary, phytosanitary agreements. That may sound kind of weird, but the best way to look at it, weed seed. When weed seed, how much weed seed is in a load? We've had problems with soil, with dirt with Mexico. Getting a framework for how those little disputes are going to be resolved, very, very important. and also in terms of rules on biotechnology enforcement.
Last week, the news about U.S. beef exports to China, there was also a little piece of that said that China would look at the 8 pending biotech products. What does that mean?
It's a good sign. I think that's an area where we look at where we actually are seeing some nice progress, because those 8 varieties were stalled. And so now we're seeing some progress to actually complete the negotiations with the National Biosafety Committee to get those events approved, ready for approval. But more importantly is looking at the whole system of biotech regulation and approval in China. That's where we have really kind of a friction point between the two countries. But things are on a better plane right now with China. We are actually talking with each other, which is really good news.
Tell me about some other markets outside of the obvious ones like Mexico, Japan.
Well, I think some of the markets you need to look at are places like the Middle East, which is a really good market right now. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, a place where we call Frontier Asia, Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. These markets are coming on. Vietnam, nice growth there. It's all made possible by programs, foreign market development, export market development programs that are funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Foreign Agricultural Service. And so what this does is it takes the investment of the Nebraska corn farmers' investment in checkoffs, leverages that with 2 government programs, Foreign Market Development Program, Market Access Program, and enables the U.S. corn farmer to be represented around the world in all these key markets that create growth for them, international market access for them.